I think that pivotal word choice, in that, the choice to separate eons ago from inception, the free will choice, which was given with love, without judgment, to play in the realm of I am separate from divinity, I am separate from God, I am separate from my true self. And we've been given free will choice to explore and experiment and project and create and react to and forget and remember and forget, and then forget that we're the ones that projected it, and we forget, and then we think that we're at the mercy of it. It is from that elevated space of deep knowing of embodiment, having you and I played in it for lifetimes and lifetimes. We're not playing with it the same way that we were. We're in it, but we're not of it. The choice element is central to what sovereignty is.
Welcome to your awakening journey. Today's destinations include higher consciousness and actualized potential. If all ascenders could now please be seated in a comfortable meditative posture, we're about to ascend. You are now arriving at your host, Brian Henry.
Ascenders, before we jump into this episode, if you've been following along with the show and you've been enjoying it and been assisted by the content, I ask that you share this episode with 3 people that you care about to support them in their own ascension journeys. As we know, as each and every individual becomes a fuller expression of themselves in their journey of their personal ascension, this supports the all. So what do you say you support those that you care about and our collective by, again, just sharing this episode or this podcast with 3 people that you care about? I'm going to go ahead and click the recording button because I share the very same perspective. Even in just what you shared there, I feel like it's something that could be worth sharing with others. And
yeah,
for me, this is about exactly what you described, resonating with one another and trusting that in that sense of connection with each other, just again, the perfect thing will unfold.
yeah. I really wanted to thank you, Brian, because you asked me, it was last year to do something, or we said we would, and then I moved, and then, I've been settling, but not only settling. I think that there's just, in the outer world, there's such an tremendous conflict and forces of awakening and light, and a lot of movement, and I really wanted to come to a place within myself where I wasn't moving as much. Do you know what I mean? Like, just to really drop into the stillness. So it's been an incredible period these last sort of 6 months, really, of noticing being triggered, and then, sort of aligning with, not aligning, but noticing the sort of resistance movement to what's going on, and, the seeing and diving into rabbit holes of so-called agendas, and then really going, okay, so this is just actually, I'm feeling I'm being yanked around, and I'm not as still as I know I can be. So it's almost a refinement process of how I perceive sovereignty, which of course I want to, share with you. And I'm sure that some of where I've stood, but I think if I look at my own trajectory, being on a conscious path, there's no starting point. You just somehow kind of organically move on to it, I think. Well, I did anyway. And to where I am now, I see that, a massive amount of concentration and effort and time and commitment has been to clear the denser energies in the shadow personality. And that's a sort of quite a consuming thing, because the older you are in soul time, the more you've accumulated as density. It's often that the people that are at some level very awake and aware, they also carry a lot of density. And I know that I have carried a lot of density. So it's very, very compacted, historic, ancient density that, of course, is gridded into the third and fourth dimensional complexes, and that's taken up a lot of time. But tangential to that, I sort of, at the very beginning, I sort of started with a inner knowing of me, of my own God consciousness. And so whilst that's always been present as a knowing or a sort of a resource, it's not been embodied as my own innate safety and innate sovereignty and guidance and dominion. So what I know has been going on is the embodiment of knowing self as source, as God, as love, however you want to define it, which is actually, it's a breakaway from dealing with density and separation consciousness, which is rooted in fear, which is rooted in belief in problems to solve, whether they're physical problems, financial problems, or relationship problems, or societal problems, or environmental problems, or galactic energetic problems, or galactic war problems. Is that the structure of the ego is invested in problems and fixing problems. And it's also heavily invested in the guilt of ever having separated from love in the first place. And guilt in the realm of duality consciousness always invites punishment, self-punishment. And so the fear and the gridded energy of fear around guilt, separation, that spawns the sense of, I am guilty because I separated from love. I'm unworthy of being as God. I deserve punishment. The world deserves punishment. And we project that onto a neutral, holographic a scene of the world. So the world is neutral. The world doesn't exist apart from what we project onto it. And for eons, the collective has been projecting separation and trauma and agendas and deception. So the kind of ascension process of waking up is not just about waking up to what we've projected and what we feel we've been at the mercy of. It's waking up to the authority and the total taking responsibility for what we've projected. So when we can do that without blame, there is a relinquishment from that density. So that's been an enormous part of where I've been working on myself, and seeing that and working energetically with the more sort of cosmic dynamics through my energy clearing work. But it's really a shift in identity from being, a light worker who is, healing self and healing the world, to knowing self as source, where there are no problems, there is nothing to heal. But that transition of identity is an embodiment process of the knowing of self as source. So all sense of I am unworthy and how that plays out in the world has to be undone. So where I'm going with my clients sort of pivotally now is with my energy clearing and the research that I do in the energy clearing, it's coming from my access point, from that identification, that knowing, and that embodied space. So I'm not kind of, the best way that I can describe is that it does not that I'm not apologizing for where I am and who I am right now, but I'm just calling on that higher self. It's not I've never particularly had an affinity with, needing a guide or an angel or that sort of the step down in spiritual hierarchies. Of course, in the infinite, there's the infinite self to know, but it's the infinite self without problems, and it's a very, very, very different terrain and sphere of energy that I am being in, and it's informing my work in a very different way. So it very much took for me to sort of completely unplug from the world and unplug from the seeming sense that that we've got a new world order coming in and we must fight and we must protest, and you and I can talk about that if you want to, but I unplugged from it. I mean, I don't have a TV anymore, so I'm not saying that I'm in denial, but I am in denial of it having power over me. And I've always known within myself, with my body and the dominion that I have over my body, is that, I don't feel threatened by a virus or a sickness or a low immunity or anything like that. Because I see my body as the vehicle for the expression of, God's self, which doesn't have problems. So my body, by law, doesn't have problems. So that doesn't mean to say that I don't have some issues with my body. Sometimes I do, but they're very much quickly overcome when the identification is reasserted. So it's, I feel like I've gone on for a while, Brian.
And that's exactly what I've invited you on to do, to open up and share as you have been. And right off the bat, I wanna thank you for all the insight that you're bringing through, because I certainly resonate with a lot of what you're sharing. Um, I want to delve deeper into this this notion, this sense that there are no problems to solve, because as I think we both know, there's plenty of people on the conscious path that still subscribe to this idea that there's something to be fixed and changed. And I also want to acknowledge that there's something to be said about that. That's something we can choose to play in, and that's a fine choice if that's what you're choosing. And I think that's the big point that I want to drive home here, and it's that just recognize that it's a choice. If you are going to choose to believe this in this path of the world needs to be healed and I'm here to play a part in that, play that game, but recognize that it's a choice that you're choosing to play that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I think that pivotal word choice, in that, the choice to separate eons ago from inception, the free will choice, which was given with love, without judgment, to play in the realm of I am separate from divinity, I am separate from God, I am separate from my true self. That we are being given free will choice, and we've been given free will choice to explore and experiment and project and create and react to and forget and remember and forget, and then forget that we're the ones that projected it, and we forget, and then we think that we're at the mercy of it. It is from that elevated space of deep knowing of embodiment, having you and I played in it for lifetimes and lifetimes. We're not playing with it the same way that we were. We're in it, but we're not of it. That the choice element is central to what sovereignty is I decide, I decide, I decide. And where I think the sort of spiritual ego comes in is, so why would I do that to myself? Well, you do it because you can. And you can also forgive it all. And you can also lose it as a sort of scarring. It's a scarring on the soul, because part of this, soul or spiritual or soul healing process is that you can take responsibility, but this is not about blame. But, true forgiveness is understanding that what you're really forgiving is you're forgiving yourself for ever having believed you separated and could create outside love. So you're creating in the realm of illusion. So you don't fix illusions with more illusions. You don't fix the body with the illusion of something that's created from the belief that sickness is real. Now, going back to what you said, of course, if you choose to play in it and you choose to forget, the experience of it is nothing short of tragic in many respects. It can, from a certain perspective, it is a cruel, unjust, chaotic, punitive world. The movement away from that and towards the truth that has abided behind all of that is a process, and it's experienced in time, because time is part of the ego construct. It's the man-made construct. We existed before time. We are timeless and eternal, and these are lofty terms, but this is where I feel no, I can speak from this, and I know myself as that identity. And I'm also, the physicality of my body moves and it can interface with people at any different level, but I also have a choice as to who and what I want to be around, because there are certain density levels that I know that I'm not going to be very useful to, because either my language or my resonance is not at a frequency that will pull a certain person with a certain mindset and fixed closed circuit mindset, is that they're not ready to hear the words. They of course their frequency can experience my frequency, and that will change it. But I don't feel a need to change people, because I know organically, when anyone tries to make me do or be something other than I'm not, I'm very resistant, because my autonomy and my individuality and my sovereignty is that I'll choose when I'm ready to shift. And I think we have to honor that in other people. I have to say, I did go through a stage when I was thinking, the gravitational pull of the so-called sort of uninformed and the more of the kind of type of mentality that is happy to conform without question to the protocols and freedoms that we've been stripped of as a sort of larger collective. It's not so much blame as feeling like that gravitational pull is actually pulling us all into this sort of one size fits all hammer. Very blunt instrument is that, okay, so the world has now got a coronavirus, and we're going to fix that with a vaccine and masks and, washing your hands and staying indoors and social distancing. And the people that have different views about health have not been able to exercise that right as publicly, as openly, as freely as the sort of lowest common denominator, which is actually very rooted in fear. But I said also, higher as you go into much more autonomy over your body and your immunity, as you choose to put in your body what you choose, what's been advised or strongly influenced to do. Again, you know, it's if it's coming from fear that you know that you weren't, that you are made in the likeness, you are as God created you. God did not create us weak or vulnerable. That's the ego, and the ego projects that onto the body. So if we're still trying to fix the body with supplements coming and fear-based nutrition, we're still sort of part of the game, but it's kind of coming closer, because actually I know that the more I have, when I moved in that spectrum towards, well, I never really was into conventional medicine at all, you know, have not taken medication if I could possibly avoid it through my life. And so moving more into, you know, the organic food, and I do green juice every day. Those are my preferred foods because they're light and they carry light, and the essence of you know, our God self. To me, my experience in my divine, in my soul matrix, is that the light is a crystalline light substance. You know, it's the light substance. Soul is crystalline plasmid light. So I choose foods that are closely aligned to that, but not out of a fear, but sort of the support and the groundedness. And that's helped me, but I don't prescribe that. You know, I don't, that's for people to choose, but not out of any sense that, you know, it's wrong to do this, that, and the other for the body. If your body is choosing, or you're choosing for your body in a different way, I think that, you know, no, I don't want to eat animals and fish. That's my choice, and it's lighter. But I hope I sort of come circuit round here, is that you know, the physical reality of conflict and agendas and protocols and government control and whatever has gone down, is that, you know, it can be very polarized. I've noticed that, you know, sort of the pro-vaccine versus the opposite, that there's some that we've got to fight for the right to put in our bodies what we want. The fighting implies our vulnerability, and that's why I pull back, because I don't feel that if I'm in my sovereignty, that I can be attacked, that I could be threatened, that my body is going to be subject to someone else's will. That's just a belief, and I'm not going to entertain that belief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's such a powerful point that you mentioned. It's in thinking that there's something to be fought that perpetuates that experience of there being a fight, a struggle, something to struggle against. But what you're describing is this state in which you feel so rooted in that sense of self-sovereignty that there is nothing to fight.
There isn't, because, you know, sovereignty is innately safe. So you know, the frequency of sovereignty, it's like you look the same, you are in the world the same, but your perception, your experience and knowing is like a silent inbuilt power force. So I feel it, you know, if I feel like I'm not involved in someone's conversation, even though I might be present with it, it does, like, it's not my reality, is that I don't feel a need to put that right or fix it. There was a time, I mean, quite a few months, when I was, you know, quite gobby. And then I just stopped. I just thought, you know, I don't like the friction inside of me. And yeah, and just I just had this inner voice saying, you know, pull back, unplug, 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 unplug from everything, pull right back into self. And that in the core of self, you know, the core matrix of the soul light, I've worked and that's what my 3-month program is about. It's like really expanding the space within self, the light space of soul within self, and in its own flow, in its own identity, which has physical space because you decide for it. And it's really interesting how that sort of building the light body consciously, and it remembers itself, that it does start to have points in the body that are very active. And for me, it's like the heart chakra has completely come down into my lower chakras, including my groin, and turned it over. So where the cause effect memory record of ego separation consciousness is largely focused and centralized in the solar plexus, that's being turned over, and that's a very visceral, tangential feeling sense of knowing that that's happened. I know that that's happened, and so there's a space inside me that wasn't there before. So it's like, my light is grounded right into the lower chakras as such, and that's a great feeling of peace, because if anyone's had any trauma, they'll know that the trigger points as like the desire to retaliate, the desire to run, the desire to hide, the desire to fix or stand up for yourself. The potency from that comes from a triggered and aggravated solar plexus, and sacral and root chakras. And so when they get to be turned over and quiet, that inner knowing of there's nothing to respond to, unless you want to play the game of it, unless you want to give it power, make it more real. And the more real you make it, the more you're kind of pulled out from yourself, and then you're in another movie. So going back to what I first said when we started talking, is that it's getting back into the quietness of self that does have a dynamic. It's not still, but it's got a I suppose it's got a sort of unfettered, unclutteredness to it. And that's why it feels like inner space, deep in the body, in the core of the body. And that's where you can be, no matter what anyone else is doing, saying, thinking, or being. And from the total internal reality of knowing self as source, you are your own guide. You are your own guide. That voice that you hear is your higher self. It's an aspect of self, and it's not something that you ask to come in or to help you. It is you. And so that cognizance, that movement from I'm asking something to help me to I am the help that other aspect to me, that ego, is asking to be released out of and away, so that you can move totally into self as source, whilst in the body, whilst on planet Earth, no matter what anyone else is doing, thinking, or being, or having, and knowing you are safe. And also knowing that your own resonance feeds other people, whether you open your mouth to them or not. People recognize it. People recognize resonance and can respond. So you're disseminating or extending presence, which is information, without forcing it on anyone. And it's part of your purpose, isn't it? Because it's what I think we want to share out of being love, a source energy. There's a natural desire to share. There's a natural desire to share, come on here with you and share with you, and trust that in that, I just said, God, just you tell me what to say. You speak through me. God being my highest self, speak through my my eyes, my hands, my face, my mouth speak through me, extend through me, I'm going to trust that what comes through is exactly going to land where it's meant to land. It's all perfect. And so others, as an extension, we're all one. It's just other aspects of self that are still in the shadow. We want to wake ourselves up as one. So I see that, the darkest aspect of illusion is like having, I don't know, it's like having a painful toenail. You're not going to let it take over the body. You'll treat it to the degree that you'll go, this is an illusory aspect of self. I'm going to treat that with love by speaking the truth, by being aligning and speaking and knowing that the truth is real, and what isn't real is the darkness. The deepest darkness is not a real and unintractable and unfixable, no matter the appearance. So I think that was the other thing I really wanted to talk about today, is that I think a big part of what has to happen to get into this place of where you and I are, completely resonating here, as there are no problems to fix, is that we've got to have the strength to be able to look past the appearance of problems in the world, on the news. We have to look past it to be able to separate it. It's positive separation. That is not the reality. And being able to look past it, to then be able to forgive it all, is what releases it from its grip as being potent, as something that can overcome us and overpower us and overwhelm us and destroy us. Because if we're all one, then everything is all one. Then if anything's got the power to destroy us, it's like my toenail's got the power to destroy me. No, it doesn't have the power to destroy me. But if I believe it does, then I live in fear, and I attract the circumstances, people, and situations that will evidence that belief, until I go, no, I've had enough of that. And that might take, for some people, another few thousand lifetimes. It's just that we do get to the point when we go, no, I'm done with that. I'm done. And I think I'm done with it. This lifetime is got, lots to do in terms of embodying this fully, probably being more public. I've got a radio show lined up, it's a daily radio show, which is just the local area. I've got to speak to the lady about it, but that seems like it's going forward, I think, and that's a very public persona. It's a huge commitment, and I just know it's the right thing to do. It's not even a spiritual broadcast, but she totally gets me. I mean, totally gets me and where I'm coming from with the sovereignty. And I'm pretty much allowed free reign to talk about what I want. So I'm taking the opportunity. I kind of knew it was just absolutely the right thing to do. So this lifetime I have to become more visible. Oh! Which is, it runs sort of, in some ways, it's very, I can be very, extrovert. The other part of me is really private. So, yeah, to work through that, but that's okay. Yeah,
But still, you be that, and you do that from a place of just expressing what feels most true, what feels like the highest expression of the God self, opposed to the fixation on the effect that it might have on the outer world.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I know that it's the right thing to do, and it's definitely the right thing to do from that perspective, is that I don't need to control how people hear me or see me. I mean, my background, I think you saw, I sent my bio through. One of my first public trainings that I did was for Central Law Training Limited, And, I was very nervous, and I'd studied, how to present to, a left brain audience with, right brain concepts. But actually, when it came to it, the power of prayer was just phenomenal in, breaking through both my own perception of limitation of how communication works, and also how other people hear. We're all one. So if I decide that what I'm saying is going to be heard at the right time by the right people in the right way, that there's no conflict in that. You're not, that's not manipulation, because you're all one. The one, that's what we're coming from. The oneness sorts out how that happens. And that's the kind of incredible miracle in reality, is that as much dominion and power as we have, there's a huge aspect of how we create that we're not consciously aware of. In other words, the how. I think when you've created something, but how, gosh, it's amazing, But that's the gift. Those are the gifts that we've been given. Incredible gifts, aren't they? From God, our Father, Mother. We've been given the gift of creation without knowing how we create. Exactly. I don't know. I don't think I want to or need to know. I'm very happy to, take my hands off and let things play.
And be received. See, that's what I love, that we are able to touch on that side of the spectrum as well. Not the spectrum, the side of the coin, I should say.
Yeah.
That is, we speak to identifying and expanding into the God self, into a sense of self-sovereignty. And I want to feel that side of the coin even more. But I think there's also something important to be said about being in that mode of humbleness and receiving as well. I think it's where we're able to bring both these together in a way that goes beyond just a conceptual understanding, but an embodied knowing that we are both the sovereign creator, as well as the one that is receiving a gift before us. That's when I find that our greatest creative energy begins to manifest and be expressed through us.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't think it ever goes away, because when you look at, as a therapist, of seeing people obviously come to me with different trauma issues that are linked to their parenting, and they're trying to idolize, either through relationships or a boss or friends, or projecting the sense of deprivation from parenting, what was missing, and trying to get it fixed out there in the world. There's this great sense of need to be fathered and mothered. And I think that the fact that when we are surrendering to our creator, we're surrendering as children to be held in that indomitable space of love that doesn't deny us anything. It's beyond the concept of denial. And so, that to know your gifts, to know what we've been given as children, to be able to receive that is you can't give what you haven't received. So we got to know what our gifts are. We've got to receive them graciously, and we extend, our knowledge to help other people come to that space of our surrender into the true sense of humbleness, is that, that you are divine and you're creator, and you're given the tools. You're given so much. That it's sort of arrogant not to know who you are. It's not arrogant to say I am divinity. It's almost arrogant to say not. But we got to fully receive in order to prove who we are, because once we've stepped away into separation and gone into amnesia, we have to, part of this process is actually proving to ourselves that we are truly divine. We evidence ourselves, the keys and codes, the activations are our own sort of turning points back into ourselves. And only you or I know for us, we only know for ourselves personally, when a miracle has happened, and when something is evidenced in front of us, and we know it's part of our greater reality, much way beyond the physical body. The reach of our own light is just, it's unlimited. So to really feel that and know that in the embodied visceral space is what allows you with all authenticity to speak from that place and share it, rather than come from, hackneyed, parroted spiritual gurus, and just repeating what someone else has said, which, whilst it might be true, it isn't embodied. It might be true for the person who spoke it, but unless it's embodied as your truth, it's just hearsay, and you can tell the difference. I think, when I think about now the people that I do tune into and follow, online, they're not very public at all. They're not very public. They might have written a few books, but they're not, Amazon bestsellers. They're actually very quiet. They have, prolific amounts of work and resources available to others, but they're not public. It's not a big me. It's not a getting. I need to be famous. I need to show that spirituality can equal. It's not. They're very. It's very quiet and very potent, in terms of their energetic frequency that comes through the work, through the sharings, through their resources, through their presence. So that's what I resonate with anyway, because there's just a huge amount of information out there, spiritual resources, and discernment is the key, isn't it? For what we now next need.
There's a lot of spiritual regurgitation happening.
You said it beautifully put.
And I love that too. I appreciate that too, and the way that can serve as a stepping stone. But I think the big message is bringing it from head to heart, from intellectual understanding to embodied knowing. I actually want to come back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier that definitely relates to that shift, that internal shift into embodied knowing. You said something very interesting about the heart chakra extending into the lower chakras, and you spoke a little bit about how the trauma that gets stored into the lower chakras. What I got from it was there's this expansion of space, of light that takes place. And one of the words that you've used a few times now that I definitely find myself using a lot, and I love that you've chosen to use it as well, is that visceral experience that can be felt.
Yes. It's your felt senses. It's the felt senses, but also the felt senses from a space of I'm kind of feeling, knowing I'm free of being victimized by my own stuck energy. Because you can do a lot of healing, a lot of clearing, a lot of transformation, a lot of shadow work, and you hear it again and again, that people feel like, oh my God, I've done all this for years and years. Why aren't I free? And of course I've felt that. It's very, very frustrating. But the transition really came from this. I think I read a couple of books, and I remembered something that somebody said to me. He was a psychic medium, a scientist. He said it when I had my Kundalini experience. I'm 40. And he said to me, when you let go of everything, you'll have it all. And of course, along the way, I thought, I've let go. No, Louise, you haven't let go. And it, the sort of penny started to drop that actually, no, every part of your life has to be handed over and the history of it transformed and cleared and released and forgiven, so that you are in the pure now. Because God is not in the past. Past is the human construct. The omnipotence of now is now. And I forgot what I was going to say now. Oh gosh, Brian, sorry. My 62-year-old brain has gone dunk.
I think maybe
She's 61, I'll be 62 at Christmas. Yeah, oh gosh, sorry. Oh yes, you said about the visceral. Yeah, it's like there's space in there. It's like, I do know, and I've read it and heard that, all the chakras join up as one light. And there is that sense, but you can't force it, you can't make it happen. And the way for me, where I created that space, as being, conscious work in owning my identity as, source without problems, and being able to look at problems and not be in them, and watch them collapse with, calling forth the miracle of at-one-ment with source, accepting my, unconditional innocence, my incorruptible innocence, accepting myself as God created me, without opposite, with nothing to change that. A process of reminding myself again and again and again and again and again in every moment of the day, until it just, the penny dropped, so it just basically cancelled out a lot of the old storage and memory of what was being kept there in those lower chakras. So it's almost like, realities eclipse each other, because whilst you're in your 3D reality, it feels very real, doesn't it? It feels all very real, and you've got to be smart, you've got to be clever, you've got to be educated, you've got to get ahead, all that sort of stuff. And not that I was any of those things. In fact, I really sort of rebelled and came a cropper many times with that kind of mentality, until every wheel on my wagon dropped off. We won't go into that now, but yeah, I mean, it's almost like everything, I did this to myself. It's sort of stripped out from underneath me, so I can rebuild on the solid organic foundation. So I mean, if you read into more of the so the people that are exploring the background to what's going on now, and how long the elite have been in power, whoever you want to call it, that all of that has a very, very dense grip on consciousness, and but there's nothing that can't be healed. I mean, it's just, I know there's nothing that can't be healed without the forgiveness. So you're forgiving yourself for ever projecting, believing, imagining that anything could happen other than love, whether that's a galactic war, or being controlled by nanotechnology, or psyop, or mind control, or alien technology. Any of it, if we can imagine it, we imagined that into reality. If you believe in that, we imagined it, so we unimagine it by unplugging from it as having a force. And so it exists at a certain level of frequency that it's not your reality if you're not giving it power. Mm-hmm. So they coexist, pseudo non-illusional experiences and realities can coexist around us. But I think the more we transform, the more we see the unreality of it, and it's not in my world. It's just, I don't read about it, think about it. The last thing I want to do is go up to London and protest. I'm not going to do that. I don't see that's the way that I'm going to create change. in my holographic reality. The way I'm going to create change is to 100% own myself as source, and compassionately witness what isn't aware of itself in that way. And the more I can compassionately be present with that and discerning about it, because don't forget, all of it has built up over eons and eons and eons and eons, is that you don't want to deal with it all at once. So I choose what I want to interface with, not from the space of I've got to heal this, but just to bring it into alignment with that that truth in my, that's now resonating in the lower chakras. Does that make sense, Brian?
It certainly does. I want to emphasize a phrase there that you used, and it was compassionately witness. And why I think it's so important that we just kind of drive that one home is because I think it's also important that we understand that withdrawing our energy from things we don't want to perpetuate or create more of or to experience doesn't mean resisting it, doesn't mean denying it. If it's there, there's this ability to observe it, compassionately witness it, with acceptance, with forgiveness, and still again redirect our energy elsewhere.
Say no. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I say, it's the power of saying no. It's the choice thing. It's the discernment. In the grand scheme of eternity, we might run around into a few more universes or fallen universes, or, what I call this is a prison planet in many respects, in that 3D consciousness. We may, choose to descend into it again. And whilst we're there, we go, gosh, no, not from any sense of, no, this is wrong, or no, I've made a mistake, but no, I'll be very discerning about energetically, what I am here to deal with. But that discernment, I believe in that, I say, pray, Holy Spirit, please, I now accept God's loving will for me. And a loving will is not a destructive will. It's not a suffering will. It's not a sacrificial will. It's not an earning the right to be loved will. It's unconditional love. So I know that God doesn't want me to suffer, and that took a long time for me to really get that. I'm not here to fix and suffer. I'm not here to sacrifice myself to save anyone or anything else, because if we're all one, if I sacrifice myself, then in the grand scheme of everything, if I've sacrificed myself to get someone else up, then who's really gone up? If I've gone down, someone's gone up, we're all one, I've gone down. So I'm just as much, needing help now. So I don't believe in that we're here to sacrifice ourselves. We're very much here to, know our empowered self as source, and to help everyone wake up to that, and not just wake up to the fact that, we've self-imprisoned ourselves in the agendas, the political history since, if you look at, British history, Parliament started, but it was started because the king needed people to look after his outposts and manage his money. That's how Parliament started. So it's all started on the basis that the king entitled himself to the sovereign power of the whole land, and carved up other countries and made everyone subservient to that, and creamed off everyone's livelihood. They were tilling the soil, and creamed off that with taxes. So the whole system is fraudulent. But we're the ones that have created ourselves into that, whether we've contributed to it or lived outside the system. It doesn't matter. We've created that. So I think that as we exist in, these old systems, we have to be very potent and knowledgeable within ourselves, so that we're not fearful of them, because definitely this is the end of a 26,000 year cycle. We're definitely coming up to, some breakthroughs here, where a lot of what's been hidden as an agenda is surfacing for, more public truth and awareness, which is what all the protesting is going on. But this has been going on for eons. We've all been slaves for eons to these agendas. So we have to wake up within ourselves, is that we've been a slave to our own ego's construct. So true sovereignty is shaking that aspect of ourselves off. And you can't do it. You've got to do it energetically from within in order to see it evidenced out there in the world as other people, places, and things. That the grip will start to lift. And I must say that the more that I've withdrawn, the more I've seen that I'm seeing that people around me, I'm less bothered about what people thinking or saying or doing. So, yeah, I hope I'm not repeating myself there.
No, it's anything that you may have been repeating has been worth repeating. As we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation,
Yeah.
it's gonna be transmitted in the most powerful way possible.
Isn't that lovely? Oh,
Just
thank
having
you.
that sense of trust that
Yeah.
and knowing that it's gonna be it'll come through exactly the way that it needs to, and it's going to be received in the best way possible for those that are ready to hear it, and in ways that perhaps go beyond how they may have even realized it is affecting them energetically.
Yeah.
Now, there is one little space here that I wanted to just go a little bit deeper in, where we're circling around this term of sovereignty, which I'm so glad that we are, because even coming into this conversation, while yes, I didn't have too much of a premeditated intention or plan for where I wanted to take it, sovereignty definitely was something that was just kind of coming up, especially speaking to you. I think, in fact, the why I had first connected with you, or where I first came across you, was a post that you wrote on sovereignty, and that's what kind of intrigued me
Yeah.
to explore you more. But what it is that I want to just kind of explore more fully is, you mentioned again that true sovereignty is a shift that has to happen internally, energetically within, before we experience the physical counterpart to what a sovereign being gets to create and play in, which of course again is a choice we make. I want to dive a little bit deeper into how we invoke that shift within ourselves.
Well, I think it's a day to day. When I say it's not as if it's something far off in the distance, I think the shreds and little signs of evidence start to present themselves, or they did for me, in this sort of unplugging process that I've done, quite tangibly, in that, I think when I spoke earlier about the gridding of fear, fear is the 3D. It's what keeps separation in place. So we separated from love, felt guilty about that, and attacked ourselves and projected blame onto others for what we ourselves feel guilty of. And so the whole kind of history of karma is really the separated ego, blaming itself for having separated, creating havoc, diffusing and putting the smoke screen up as it projecting onto others, being the victim of them, when in fact we're the ones that have victimized ourselves. So once that sunk in for me as a truth, and it does resonate for me, it really tells me why some things in my life have just stuck for as long as they have, until I really took on the fact that actually I am incorruptible innocence, and karma is a belief, and it's a very powerful belief and has a very powerful construct, until you let it go. You let it go. and you've got to give yourself permission to let it go and own your incorruptible innocence, no matter what. Seeing yourself as God sees you, that it doesn't matter what you did or didn't do, you're always, a beloved child of God. And what you did or didn't do occurred in the realm of the illusory ego. So you gotta really take that inside yourself about what's true and what's false. What's true is that you are incorruptible innocence and the beloved child of God, and whatever you did or didn't do cannot change your changeless truth. And your changeless truth has dominion and can collapse the appearance of anything that isn't true. So only love is real and nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. That's from A Course in Miracles. I hope I've quoted that right. But it really, really resonates for me. And that's how inside myself, when I remind myself of that, when I get caught off guard and I sort of slipped out and momentarily gone into amnesia, where I'm fearful about something, or I sort of have a fearful projection of something happening, or missing the postman when I need to fix the post, or I don't know, just anything a bit like, oh my gosh, like this morning I went to the beach, Brian, because I thought, I'm going to go to the beach. It's really beautiful weather here. We've had a tsunami of rain for the last 2.5 weeks. And now this week, the sun is blazing and it's hot and all my flowers have come out. And literally I'm 2 minutes from the cliff and the wood. So I thought, I'll go to the beach. So I went down on the beach and I hadn't charged my phone up. I hadn't charged it up. I thought, I can't take it with me. And so I didn't have any concept of time. I did some energy clearings on the cliff for some clients. And, I never really know quite how long they take, but they took an hour. And I found someone, because it's quite remote here, found someone with the phone. But my concern was, I'm going to miss the call with Brian. I won't be back in time. Or maybe there's an internet connection that won't work and I've got to be on time. And I've got to change my clothes because I'm all sweaty and just all these things, and then I just go, hang on a minute, Louise, you've already been told by God that everything's going to be fine. And, you can relax and you can have a great conversation with Brian because he just tuned in. He's got the resonance where he's up there with where you want to be talking, You want to be talking about this stuff, Louise. You don't want to hide who you are. You don't want to hide where you've been. And you want to make it and we're doing it. So what I'm saying here is that when we get into concern mode, we've dropped out of our God self. And when you catch yourself, you can bring yourself back. Does that answer your question?
Day-to-day reminding.
Minute by minute, really.
Moment to moment.
Yeah.
Or this moment. Can we remember that here in this now moment?
Yeah.
Incorruptible innocence. I'm gonna definitely come back.
Isn't it lovely? It's
Beautiful.
beautiful that it's not mine. It's from a woman called Nuke Sanchez. And maybe it is from A Course in Miracles, but it's something that, it's not something that the ego mind wants to entertain, because the ego is very invested in, justice, who's right, who's wrong, who's deserving, who isn't deserving, who needs reward, who needs punishment, who needs to wait, who needs to go first, who needs to win, who needs to lose. Can you see where I'm going? It's set up for war. And it's the split aspect of the mind that the ego is always in duality. It's sort of like it's got a positive and negative, like it wants positive goals, but it's coming from fear because it doesn't want to lose. And so the whole setup, the game there in the ego is winning and losing, and forgiving another because they're wrong instead of forgiving yourself for projecting them into your reality. That somebody's right at the expense of someone being wrong. It's always coming at a price. In other words, seek but don't find. There's no freedom, and it's a locked in closed circuit energy matrix. And you can do all the positive thinking in the world, but the positive thinking is still coming from the belief that the opposite is real within that matrix separation, and it isn't. And so positive separation is really really discerning the chaff from the wheat. What is true, what is false. Don't try and fix in the area of false with more tools that come from falsehood or come from the fixing mode. The truth of who you are will collapse all obstacles miraculously without you knowing how. So the real issue we're talking about now is trust. Yeah, the trust thing. It's absolutely huge. It is in itself. It's a rite of passage. There is a timeline where I believe it's built upon itself, in that if you see an obstacle, it's first identifying that that's an appearance. It's not, it can't overcome you if you're identifying with the truth. So it's looking past the appearance and then handing the appearance of the problem over. So again, I'd like to quote from Course in Miracles. There is a lesson, let me recognize this problem is already solved, or something to that effect. So it's already solved despite the appearances, and you're trusting that that miracle is the truth of God's reality exists, foundationally behind all appearances. That's already going on. Heaven on earth is already existent now, and you're in it. So you're withdrawing your attention and your five physical senses off this so-called problem, even if it's illness or pain or sickness or lack or some kind of tragedy or perceived loss or threat of loss. It's withdrawing all of yourself from that, so that you drop back into the core soul matrix of yourself, which I've spoken to you earlier, as much as you can get inside your core and your light, and letting go and surrendering the problem in the trust that it's that you're not trying to fix the problem. In asking for to be free of a problem without going to the source of the problem, you're just going to replicate some kind of problem elsewhere. So trust is really building the knowing that what you're doing is you're processing back into the source of all problems. Is there's only one problem, and that is the belief in separation and what it manifests and what you're trying to hide and what you're trying to run from and what you're trying to fix. So you're withdrawing the allegiance to the belief that you ever separated and could be punished by any external adverse experiences, letting go and trusting that what's really being healed is your consciousness. What's really being healed is your allegiance to what is not true, and we need help with that. So asking for help, asking for the miracle to be at one in the moment with God's loving will, where there are no problems, and to really come right into the knowing and the beingness of that. That's the true change, because once that is built as a space of being, then problems are like they're passing things that up. That's anything. It doesn't matter whether it's small or big, because there's no hierarchy in illusions, and there's no hierarchy in the God that can fix it. If God doesn't have any problems, then the problems out there, it doesn't matter how big or small we think they are, they can all be collapsed. And that takes a trust in that belief, because the human mind is always measuring and fixing and saying, yeah, that can be healed with the miracle, but not that. I'll give my health to God, but not my money. I'll give my children to God, but not my spouse and my relationship and my romance. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give my health to God, but I won't give my career to God. So the trusting is really withdrawing human control, ego mind control, and its fear-based illusion to trusting that the solution is already here. What has to catch up is that we have to be clear in consciousness about that heaven on earth space. And that heaven on earth space and knowing self as that is really a big chunk of where I take people in the soul sovereignty program that I do. Because, I'm hoping when people come to me, they've done a big chunk of their, shadow work, because that frees them up to be able to do that big reality shift, actually, to there are no problems. But whilst the body and your thoughts and feelings and emotions and story is wrapped up with trauma, until some of that's been unraveled very carefully and very safely. And don't forget, I've had a background in stress management at London Bridge Hospital. I'm qualified to work with, the high level of stress and trauma that is, that it's like they've got past that and they're much more into, okay, so I can do a reality shift. But, it's one thing moving out of the matrix. It's another thing knowing what you're returning to. The matrix is you're returning to your state as heaven on earth. And that is it's a movement of trust and letting go and reaffirming what is true. I probably said that 100 different ways.
And I think doing so has been just the perfect way of driving that point home. Letting
What did I say? Oh, I trust my kids with you, but not my husband. Yeah.
Unconditional is what
trust is it's major, because the default, especially when we think we've got a big problem that is sort of in human terms unfixable, like a diagnosis or some kind of financial issue or housing issue, what we think is so problematic that we've got to get in there and fix it before it gets even worse, to take our hands off and let things unfold and be able to work in time with that. And because people use time against themselves, if the time's run out, I've got a deadline, I've got this to do, that's what we paid. We work with time in such a way that it threatens us. So a big part of soul sovereignty program is using time as our friend, as God. God can use anything in the created world of separation to wake us up back into his love where there is no threat. So then time starts to collapse, or it starts to be elastic, very elastic. And all things change. And in that respect, what you and I are saying is that the world starts to, in many respects, it looks the same, but we experience it differently. We experience it differently without the fear. Yeah.
Louise, before I give you some final thank yous and one last grand finale question. I'm glad that you brought up is it the soul sovereignty program or self-sovereignty?
I think it was the soul sovereignty, and then I changed it to self-sovereignty, but they're pretty much the same. I just tried a bit with language, but it's just, it's the semantics. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because I did want to give you the opportunity to just share with our listeners where they can find out more about you or work with you, perhaps, if they would be interested in doing so.
Okay, well, I don't know if you're going to give a link to my website. I mean, I'm on Facebook, Louise Smart, and my website is www.emotional-detox.com. When you go there, there's a link to energy packages, and that goes through to all my programs. So my soul sovereignty program is there. My 3-month soul transformation booster program is there. There are two that I think people that are listening today would probably be very interested to take a look at. And with anything, if you want to work with me, anyone can book a free connect call where we explore what kind of the longer programs. I mean, not the short 20-minute stuff that I do or the week-long program, but the longer programs to discuss in a free connect call. But the soul sovereignty program is between 6 and 12 months, and it is really sort of the deep process of taking people in all aspects of their life into this dominion I'm talking about. So it's totally tailored to the individual. So, and also the individual's program and schedule, you know, whatever their work situation is or their domestic situation is, fit around that. So we work on Zoom, and it's a combination of one-to-one sessions, normally 90 minutes, where we will talk, we will process what needs to be processed out. But in between sessions, I do energy research and clearing, which will help to kind of just basically take off the hair coat. You know, we kind of walk around on a daily basis with some of the stresses that we build up, whether it's with family relations, work, just the sort of what I call the sort of flux energy, and any of the old programming and, you know, karmic routing and patternings. A lot of that can be cleared off your energy system. I work from my higher self with your higher self to clear what you're ready and able to clear, and we research and I give you feedback from that, and that just basically loosens things up so that you've got more space, energetic space and inner space, to be able to start to build the matrix of your soul, to start to transform and fully come into, you know, the core of your soul, and let that be your lead, rather than the mental conceptualization that is rooted in separation consciousness. So I take you, you know, wherever you're at. When I say you, I don't mean you, Brian, unless you want to join me. Wherever you're at, I can be working with you at the sort of pace that is right for you. But the end goal is to take you much more firmly and, you know, anchored in your sovereign dominion, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what's going on around you, and no matter what other people thinking, are feeling, saying, or doing, or being, even if they're close members of family or your intimate partner, is that you are the center of the holographic reality that you inhabit. And what I want to do with you is to help you to know you're at the center of your own loving universe, because you decide. And so when you decide how you're going to let that play out, whilst you undo the old ego programming that is either wanting to keep you separate from that, or is wanting to sabotage that, or is wanting to keep you enslaved in something, even when you know that you do and are a child of God, and you have the right to this heaven on earth space here and now, this lifetime. And that's what this, you know, the whole pivotal momentum of ascension is that the real opportunity now, because in fact I think that many people are right up against it. Often when we come very close to this pivotal shift, it's when lots of things seem to go wrong with the body or our life, because that's the ego really kicking off and going, no, I'm not going to let you. And we, you know, the only war that we ever have is the one we have within, I believe. It's just my perspective, but it's very liberating, and it is inclusive. Of course it's inclusive. You're not an island doing this. No one's an island doing this. We're all together in it, but it's a sort of like concentrated fast track. Well, it's concentrated. So every year, yes, lots to go, to move through. And I try to make it fun. I'm a happy person, and I like to have fun, and I'm not dictated to by the work ethic or the 9 to 5. So I work with clients at different times of the day, as I'm sure you do, Brian, don't you? From all over the world. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I did say we have one last grand finale question to ask. But funny enough, I think a lot of what you just shared could be the perfect response to what I'm about to ask. But I am going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
You ready for the ascension question?
Yeah, of course.
Louise, you just realized the power to telepathically communicate to all of humanity. What do you have to say?
I think, thank God. I thank God that my life has really come to a point now where all the dots are joining up, from being very young, wanting to know God, Christ, and and know what Christed consciousness is now. And it's it's not another being who was alive 2,000 years ago. It's not that it's separate from that, but that all of those teachings embodied are what ascension is. We're ascending into, or waking up out of, the illusion, rather than waking up within the illusion. So it's further, it's even more expanded. So when we wake up in the illusion, we're waking up and realizing, like, oh, I do have power. I don't have to do this. I can say no. Yes, we're under an agenda. That's waking up within the illusion. Waking up out of the illusion is knowing that all of it is the illusion, without being in any way spiritually bypassing or being disrespectful to others that are still going through that, because we might incarnate again and go back into the illusion, who knows. So that's ascension, and speaking and meeting and disseminating this what I know, what I feel. Well, we're all one, so how can we not? It's just owning it, really, without any sense of being special or different or appointed or whatever, because that's all separation consciousness, needing to be different, special, gifted, or psychic, or whatever the list goes on, important or timely or pivotal, or all those things. I don't, no, not for me. So that's what it means for me. Sort of like, oh, it's natural, really. It's the more natural, I think it's, as you look back at childhood, how natural you are. You don't have worries. Well, I didn't have any worries until I was 6. It's that sort of ease that, just like, it's magical and it's safe and it's beautiful, and it's an exploration, and that safety is what I feel I've regained, just feeling free and safe with a purpose, not squandering time. That doesn't mean that I don't have a lot of time to myself, and I really relax and I really do what I want when I want, but I don't feel that's squandering, because it's being in beingness. Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
And thank you for inviting us into such an experience by sharing about yours and being this energetic invitation into a sense of self-sovereignty. I appreciate you. We appreciate you and all that you're being and expressing. And I'm so very grateful that you took this time to be with us and share on the Awaken podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for all of that. Likewise. You're really good. You're a really good facilitator, because it's, it's a broad, there's lots to talk about, and it's easy to go off on tangents, but you'll really gently keep me, within a good focus, relevant, constructive focus for us and for anyone who's listening. So thank you so much. That's a skill.
I really appreciate
a special skill, because you're special.
If I'm special, we must all be.
Yes, we are. We're all beloved and special. Yeah.
Thank you again, Louise.
Thank you, Tom. God bless.